All right, everybody. Let me go ahead and get us full screen here. I just want to go ahead and say welcome back. This is going to be a fun episode that we have here of Orchestrate This. Let's go ahead and get intros and all that stuff out of the way as people are chiming in, though. My name is Michael Leondo. I'll be your host for this lovely evening. If you want to go ahead and let us know where you are from, it's always great to see folks in different parts of the world hopping on with us, engaging with us throughout this session. And we do have a pretty awesome session with us today. As you can see, I have my coworker on stage with us. This is going to be Austin Wilkins. I don't want to steal his thunder too much, but Austin, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I've seen the demo that you have in store for us today, so I'm excited for it. I've seen the magic. A lot of folks are talking about AI. A lot of folks are talking about workflow orchestration. That's the buzz that we have, and you've put that all together. Is that right? Let's not reveal the magic, but am I par for the course so far?
Yeah, I've written a little bit of glue, which has been quite magical. It's made a connection that creates a lot of power. A phrase you'll hear me use throughout the talk is that it's the execution arm of AI, and it may not
Nice.
make sense to you what that means now, but I'll get into that, and it will be. I think it's the most powerful aspect of what I'm about to share with you.
Super cool, super cool. And then I guess I'm wondering, before I let you take it away, like where are you at with this whole like world of vibe coding? Are you like full on vibe coding these days? Are you anti like letting AI agents do the work for you? What's your stance?
Personally, the key takeaway I have from this kind of concept of vibe coding is that you can never hand over your developer expertise to AI. You still have to maintain it. You have to know everything that AI is doing. AI should be your assistant and not your boss.
It should be your assistant, not your boss. I love that. I haven't heard anybody say that. Awesome, great. I don't want to get into spoilers. It's really hard for me not to talk about what we have going on today. So that's all you. I am going to, I believe you have a slide deck for us today.
Yeah.
Maybe a demo, but I am going to let you take it away. I believe that you know how to share your screen and do all that stuff. So I'm going to hop off and I'm going to let you show the audience what you have going on. Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah. As Mike said, my name's Austin Wilkins. I'm a senior engineer at Orkes. I started here just about 3 months ago. And I'll be the first to tell you that I was a complete AI rube prior to working on the MCP server. And about 2 months ago, I started working on it and have gained an incredible amount of knowledge. I still consider myself an imposter in the space, but the P server itself has brought to light a lot of things to me with not only the power of AI, but the power of Conductor with AI. What I'll be talking today a lot about is the different ways you can interact with Conductor and basically do a step-by-step approach to help you understand the power of the MCP server I wrote. And I know that term might be new to a lot of people. It stands for Model Context Protocol. I'll give you little Easter eggs of knowledge along the way about it, but by the end, I'll have a full explanation of what the MCP server actually is, because it was definitely new to me only months ago. First, just a little bit of background. So Conductor on its own is very powerful. As an engineer, I like to think of it in terms of I don't have to do state management anymore. It's a lot of work to get to the actual execution code that you want to get to in any production environment. As an engineer, I was trained in college to think, okay, I'm doing these cool algorithms all the time. I'm writing this cool code. But when you get out into the business field, you realize, oh, I'm doing just an insane amount of implicit state management through all the different ways I'm plugging code together and wiring things. And Conductor abstracts a lot of that away. There's a lot of other really great benefits to Conductor, but the primary one for me as a developer is that now I can just focus on that discrete logic that's fun for me to write, and all of the other aspects can be abstracted away, and I can focus on the business logic and the code, and then everything else, retries, failures, the durability, the security, all those things are taken out of my hands. So what's Anthropic? So Anthropic, if you're not familiar, is an AI company, and they released in, I think it was November, a new specification called MCP specification, the Model Context Protocol. And this is a clear means for connecting external tools to AI. So prior to the MCP spec, AI developers were having to find all sorts of creative ways to connect external tools and make them accessible to AI. They require a ton of custom implementation. And Anthropic came out with this specification, which there were other common specifications that people could have used, but this one has a particular focus on AI. And I think that's why it's gained so much traction. And it allows basically to write a little bit of code, a little bit of configuration, and instantly, instead of having AI have to write a bunch of specialized code to interact with the millions of services that are out there, now the services themselves can write a little bit of code and instantly gain connection to any AI that's also implementing the MCP specification. Like I said, we'll get more into that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through the different ways to interact with Conductor leading up to the MCP server. And I'm going to talk about them in terms of the amount of technical intervention and the amount of speed each of these ways gets you, each of these means of interaction gets you. And when I say intervention, I'm talking about the explicit application of technical knowledge or skills. So you're actually actively using that knowledge and skills you have to make adjustments. And one theme that's common throughout this talk is that, and I mentioned this right at the beginning with Michael, is that there's no point at which you can give away your technical expertise and not have it and be effective. At every level, that technical expertise is necessary. The different levels of intervention, what that gets you is ease of development as an engineer, and it makes onboarding quicker. But in order to be an effective engineer, you still have to understand everything that's going on from the bottom to the top. So at no point will I recommend playing it easy. What I recommend is, the paradigm that I'm focused on is the amount of ease in which, or the amount of speed at which you can become onboarded to the service. I don't know if that's clear as mud, but hopefully it becomes clear as we go through. So I'll talk about each way to interact and the intervention required as well as the speed. So the most basic level of interacting with Conductor is through workflow JSON. And in truth, this is not an actual means of interacting with Conductor. It's the theory behind a workflow. A workflow on its own is just theory until it's applied somewhere. So there's a few different ways you can apply it. You can apply it through the RESTful APIs, SDKs, and UI, and we'll get to those. But the manual JSON creation, this is what a workflow is at its core, is just a JSON structure. And another theme I'll talk about a little bit is the difference between power and ease of use. So when you're dealing with something that has a lot of power, typically it's very hard to use. And what we do as engineers is we abstract to make things easier to use. One thing I think about with this regard is I used to work at Google, and they have a system called Borg. And Borg is their server infrastructure. Everything runs on Borg, or at least it used to when I was there. Everything runs on it, from their data pipelines to their websites. It's just a billion machines distributed across the world. And you have the power at your fingertips to access those machines via their configuration files, the Borg config. And as an engineer at Google, you spend a lot of time getting frustrated by these configs and working in these configs. And the reason they're so frustrating to work with, or the reason they require so much technical expertise and dedication to learning, is because they're so powerful. And everything we build on top is effectively an abstraction away until you get to a simple website, right? Or an application on your phone. And now it's really easy to use, but at that abstracted level, you have way less power over what's going on. And so that's a theme I'll get to later too. But typically more power equals more complexity in use, and more abstraction means less power, but typically less complexity in use. So here you have complete control over everything. But you also have to have complete technical expertise in order to be the most effective possible, because you have to memorize everything from the ground up here. You have to know every single little field. You have to know how the different tasks interact. And you basically have to parse in your own mind the different steps of the workflow by looking at the JSON. So this requires the most technical expertise, dealing with these files directly. Now, like I said, this is just theory. So now we get to the first usage of these workflow definitions. And another thing I'll point out is that at every state has its benefits. It's more complex to deal with a workflow, but it's more powerful, like I said. So it can be very effective to edit workflow definitions directly. So here we have RESTful API usage. This is the first implementation. It's very slow to deal with RESTful APIs, and it has a high level of technical expertise. Basically, there's no help here. We have our APIs. You have to provide the workflow yourself, and you have to understand the workflows yourself. So you can build that own abstraction level if you want, right? But it's not given to you through the RESTful API. If you want abstraction, you have to write it in your own code in order to like make workflows and creating workflows easier to deal with. That being said, the RESTful APIs are incredibly powerful. I actually built the MCP server on top of our RESTful APIs because I found it to be the most effective way to do it. So I'm not throwing any shade at the RESTful APIs. They're great. And they also are language agnostic. So you can interact with Conductor in any way fit as long as your application has access to the internet. But like I said, it requires the most understanding of workflow definitions. There's no abstraction layer between the previous slide with working with the workflow JSON and working with the RESTful endpoints. So the next level up is SDK development. Now we get a little bit quicker and you use a little bit less of your technical intervention. And the main takeaway that gives you that a little bit increased speed and a little bit less intervention is the dot notation of your IDE. So now you're developing, hopefully you have a good IDE that can do all the type checking, and you hit dot notation and boom, now you don't have to memorize every single field that comes into play. And you can't accidentally try to plug a task where it doesn't go or a definition where it doesn't go, because the IDE hopefully will create those bumpers for you. And like I've said before, in order to be the most powerful developer, you still have to understand and know all those things exist. Maybe you can cheat a little bit by not memorizing the exact lettering of the values of the fields, but you still, in order to be the most effective engineer, need to at least understand all the concepts that are there. So yeah, this is a great way to interact. It also is cool because with a workflow, you can version a workflow, but now you can encode version how you're interacting with that workflow and how you're creating that workflow. So you get a second layer of versioning. So now we'll get to the much easier way to interact with, or not easier, sorry, I keep using that word, but it's really a matter of speed and intervention. Like I said, at every level, you still have to have that technical expertise, but now there's more bumpers. And what that effectively means is you can ramp up easier because things are a little more in front of you, and the bumpers help you focus on the fields that maybe are more defaults that you might care about the most, but it's still a little bit of guesswork in terms of how that's presented to you. And you still have to be, like I said, very knowledgeable in order to be effective. So this is the way I think most people probably interact with conductors to the UI. Because now instead of parsing a workflow JSON in your mind to understand what comes before what, now we have a UI which abstracts that away for you. And you can see right in front of you the ordering and what's happening. And that's as like I mentioned before, I'm an AI rube, but I'm also a technological rube. I didn't even say technological right. And so I prefer to have things visualized as much as possible personally, because it's just easier to parse that way. Much easier to read a UI than it is to read code in a lot of cases. Not always, I'm sure. I'll get some pushback on that. But here we have a lot more of the bumpers, like I was saying. So you can use your technical expertise in a cursory matter, glance over, make sure it meets your expectations, and build workflows much quicker. We also have a lot of built-in templates, so you can build workflows quicker that way as well. And yeah, it's built right on top of Conductor. So now you have most of the power in there still, right? And ultimately there's a little tab at the top where you can go into the code and edit it directly too. So none of the power is necessarily lost, and that power and abstraction theme I was talking about, but it's hidden from you a little bit to make your life a little easier. And that's what abstraction is effectively, right? So now we get to the really fast way to interact with workflows and the least amount of intervention, and that's through AI generation. And a funny aspect about this is that AI assistants, when they generate workflows for you, they're generating them through the workflow JSON. So it's a step backwards in terms of how it's actually creating workflows in terms of intervention. in complexity because now it's doing the most complex way possible. It's generating workflows through the workflow definition JSON. But from a user perspective, the API for creating those workflows is much more human now. So you can very quickly just come up with an idea, type it out into Claude, and not have to really know or not use, like I said, that technical expertise of what fields go where. You can rely on Claude or Cursor, whatever your AI is, and it will generate very quickly a complex workflow for you. But as I mentioned, you don't want to let go of your technical expertise. You don't want to give it to someone else. You still have to have it because Claude can do some crazy stuff. I built some workflows with Claude and it goes off way off on the wrong track. But if I didn't know anything, I wouldn't know any different. And I would allow it to create workflows that were not really of any utility to anyone. They might even look impressive, but they don't do anything close to what I had anticipated. And so I still have to apply all of that knowledge that I have to guide Claude, to prompt Claude correctly, and to review everything that Claude has done. And Claude isn't the only AI assistant that will do this for you. Cursor and then many others. Anyone that implement this MCP server or MCP client specification can do that. And like I said, we'll get more into that too. So it's very fast to create workflows. The main thing with working with Claude, the only main drawback is that you have to do a lot of back and forth. Claude's maybe your assistant, but you're also Claude's assistant because now you have to go back to the UI or the APIs, get the workflow, plug the workflow it created into it, then go back to Claude and say, hey, there was an issue with some of the specification or the schema was wrong, or I ran the workflow and it didn't give me the workflow, the output I wanted. And you have to go back and forth. So you're the middleman between your assistant and conductor. And I'm not hitting on that. Like I said, you can create workflows very quickly. It's very impressive, but you still have a little bit of that middleman work, which can be frustrating. And so that's where we get to finally our MCP server. This is by far the fastest way to interact with Conductor, and it removes you as the middle person to do all the intervention. So that's not only does that moving that intervention make you have to do less work in terms of using your technical expertise, but that is part of the speed as well. Because now Claude can go back and forth with Conductor and create, execute, test, run, analyze, do all of these things directly with Conductor, leaving you out of the loop. Now, how it does that is through the MCP tool. And I promise the very next slide is where we'll get to actually what the MCP server is. But here is what it does. The MCP server, it connects all the APIs to Claude. So I do a little bit of configuration in Claude, or like I said, any other AI. I just happen to use Claude personally a lot. So that's the one I'll name. So you do a little bit of configuration work. You give Claude this configuration, and then bada bing, bada boom, you have access to a whole bunch of tools for interacting with Conductor. So this is interesting in that power paradigm because you're back to having the most amount of power because now you can create workflow definitions down to the JSON level of interaction, but you have all of the ease of use of interacting with natural human language. AI was already really impressive, but this just seemed magical to me, connecting these two, because I just sit back and my AI assistant does almost everything. And my intervention is very minimal. I still have to go in, I still find errors, I still have to correct occasionally because I still have to understand what's going on, but I can take care of most of that work through prompting and really take myself out of the loop and watch this magical interaction work with any service that you create an MCP server work for. But there is something specifically magical about Conductor with Claude, and I'll get to that, or with AI assistants, and I'll get to that in a minute. So finally, what is MCP Protocol? The monocontext protocol overview. So like I said, before the MCP servers, before the MCP spec, AI assistants, if you wanted to interact with some tool of yours, you'd have to reach out to the developers directly and say, hey, can you please make some deal with me? Or maybe I can help contribute to your AI and do the connectivity. but you had to do all this specific code, which plugged into agentic loop code that would interact with your LLM so that the LLM would then have access to your server. And this was a nightmare for connectivity because with thousands and thousands of tools out there and server endpoints that you can hit, and it's probably closer to millions. I don't know the exact number, but that's very untenable for an AI developer to have to add connectivity to all of those things, and at least to do it well, because maybe you could come up with some generic way to interact with all those APIs or have your LLM learn, but it's never going to be perfect and never going to be pretty. And that's where the MCP specification came in. It's basically a little thin wrapper around your server that the MCP client, which AI assistants understand, or will implement. The AI assistants implement the MCP client, which then understands the MCP server spec. So you write this little teeny wrapper around your code, and now any AI that's implementing the MCP client spec can have instant connectivity and instantly understand what's going on with your server and how to interact with it. So it's very cool because it brings the world of tools, of external tools, to AI and gets us a little closer to that spookier Skynet situation where AI can control everything. So the server implementation, very simple. All you do is write a little bit of code around your endpoints, and the specification will provide everything you've written around that code to the MCP client implementer, which is our AI assistants. So the AI assistants now get your whole doc string, the name of your function, and they know that that's a tool that you're providing to them. So you can write a really complex doc string to really help AI understand your tool. And that's typically, I think, recommended to make it very clear, because everything here is everything you write around your code, and the code will be just under here, right, that you're actually executing. But everything you write around it is just basically documentation for AI, and that documentation is handed off, and now it knows instantly how to interact, and it interacts through that MCP protocol to call your tool. So we're going to get to the fun stuff now and try a demo. Claude was choking on me earlier, so we'll see how well it does. Let's keep out of here. But here I have an instance of Claude, and what I've done is I've added my MCP server configuration file, which basically just points it to the code that will run the server. Claude then spins up that server, and now it has access to all my endpoints. I give a small configuration file that tells it which endpoint to hit and what API keys to use. So now I can say, I don't know if this one's going to work, honestly. I came up with this just a minute ago, but I thought it would be fun to try out, and I'm sure it will give us some insight into how things are working. But basically, now that I have that configuration file set, Claude has access to all of my tools that I've given it that deal with workflows. So now I'm going to ask Claude, create a workflow for me and test it. And I can tell it to do much more things, and it will just spin until it's finished. To tell me if it's safe to surf near data point and if there's some decent waves. Like I said, at every level, you still, in order to be effective, have to understand the technical aspects. Removing that technical intervention that we talked about just makes it easier to onboard, which is really great. So this is definitely the way I recommend for new engineers to Conductor to interact with Conductor, because it really does give you a lot of bumpers and helps guide you to gaining that technical expertise much quicker than staring at a JSON file. Not that you shouldn't understand the JSON file at some point. But here we go. I'm going to ask it to create this workflow. And I had to know that a lot of times AI assistants try to create simple tasks, which require me to create my own worker, which I don't want to do. I want it to do all the work inside of Conductor. So I told it to use an inline task, which just is a JavaScript task that works inside the workflow. So I don't have to create workers for it. And I told it to use HTTP tasks. I told it not to use public APIs, because a lot of times AI assistants will look out and say, oh, this is a great API for this, because the best APIs are going to be paid for a lot of times. And so to plug it into my workflow, I'm like, I don't want to go pay for an API key. I can get by with some public use APIs. And then we'll see if this does what we want it to. And if it doesn't, we'll get some good insight on how to interact with Claude or any AI assistant. Now, this is the awesome part. of an AI assistant. It just spits out JSON and JavaScript and everything technical really quickly. Created the workflow. Looks like it succeeded. Now it's going to try to test it. Now it's going to pull the execution results, see what it got out of it. Okay, so there was an issue. It used some API that doesn't act the way it wanted to. So it's going to change the workflow. And this is the magic of the MCP server, that now AI can just do all of this work on its own with my own project, right? So you bring your own project to the table, AI instantly knows how to interact with it. And like I said, it's really powerful with Conductor because now it does all of the nitty gritty of creating workflows for you. And here we go. Like I said, Claude has been shoddy today. It's stopped and gone on me a few times. But if we go into the developer edition, which I'm sure Michael will point you all to, if we refresh the workflows, we can see it tried to create this workflow for us. Great. It tried to create, it hits the endpoint, it got the latitude and longitude for data point, and then it has the JavaScript function. And we can see it probably tried to run it too. So maybe it failed a couple times, and then here's the latest one that completed. Let's see how it did. Nah, brah. I guess it wasn't a good day to surf and data point right now. And we can even look at the inputs and outputs. We can look at the temperatures. All this is coming from the API from the first task, and the JavaScript now that Claude wrote is now parsing all that information and giving me an output of either surf's up, dude, or nah, brah. And this will tell me. So now I have a workflow I could use all the time. I could run this workflow every day and send it to my phone or wherever and have an idea if I should head out to the beach or not. I'm in Idaho, so there's not a whole lot of waves out here. But if I were in LA, there you go. Very powerful in connectivity. That's, I think, the takeaway there. Now, the kind of coincidental almost magic of Conductor and the MCP server, and this is, I don't know if our CEO and our founders had enough foresight to anticipate this, and I don't think they would have, but it actually works out that Conductor, and this is like the most powerful aspect of the MCP server, is that it makes Conductor the execution arm of AI. I mentioned that before. And what that means is Conductor is all about doing enterprise work and managing, abstracting away all that business logic, security, all those major concerns of engineering. So you just focus on your business logic and your code execution. And now, and AI assistants are more about helping individual productivity at the moment. There's not a whole lot of enterprise AI out there. Looks like, oh, too late to bump up my font size, huh? Right, I missed that. But now we can bump this up if this is what you're talking about. I think it's a little late for that. There we go. This makes it a little easier. But now, because of the MCP server, you can create enterprise work with workflows and hand that off to your company, right? And you can create workflows for your company using your individual AI. And the more exciting part of that is that AI typically runs in black boxes, and it's interacting with an LLM, which is going to always act differently, right? You can't force an LLM to return the exact same results every time. And so if you use Conductor as your workhorse for your AI assistant, now you have codified, repeatable work, and you can visualize everything that your AI intends to do. So using Conductor as your execution arm of AI is a really powerful concept, which is almost coincidental, probably not entirely, but almost coincidental in that now you can do all of your connectivity to external services within Conductor and just connect Conductor to your AI assistant. And now you can do all this enterprise work, all your even personal work, whatever. And you've codified everything that AI assistant means to do in a way that's repeatable, editable, versionable. And it's just a really powerful way to interact with your AI, because instead of doing, although the MCP server spec reduced the amount of configuration you have to do, it's still a little bit of configuration that you have to do. And you still have to go out and get all your API keys and plug all those in and wire everything together. Using Conductor instead, plugging your API keys into a Conductor, now you only do one configuration of your assistant and you get an immense amount of power by doing things through your workflows. So this is like the aspect of the MCP server that I'm most excited about, because it takes what is typically something you might use for generating work for school or maybe your own personal work for work, and turns it into something that is powerful for an entire company. I've commented on some of this already, but basically the power is that you can orchestrate all of that interaction to external integrations. You can do all the connectivity in Conductor and then have one simple configuration with your AI. And now you have access to all those different tools and execution logic. And the best part is you can see it run, right? You can hit execute and now you can see every step that your AI assistant has created for you. And I've pretty much already commented on most of these, so I don't need to hark on these too much. The repeatability is the most poignant facet of this slide for me, and that instead of going back to Conductor, talking to LLMs is really expensive. And so instead of going to Claude and having it do the same work over and over and spend all your money interacting with an LLM, you can have it create that work once for you. And now you have it repeatable, and you can abstract Claude away from, or cursor, whatever, away from your actual execution logic. And I don't know if there's anything I need to really say on this slide. I think it pretty much sums up most of what I've already talked about. So we'll skip on. And so you've seen, as I talked, the different ways of interaction with Conductor, from high intervention to minimal intervention. At every level, like I said, that technical expertise is so important, but you get bumpers along the way to help you build quicker and help you onboard quicker, which is, I think, also really a great aspect. So Anthropic gave us this kind of magical specification. Everyone's been implementing it. It's become very popular at the moment. And we implemented knowing it would be useful, and then it surprised us, and that it has become very useful and transform what Conductor can do with AI in general. So that's pretty much everything I had to say on it. Your job now is to go check out the developer edition and plug in the MCP server on your own. You can simply go to these links. You can download the MCP server. You can configure your AI assistant, and you can go try it on the developer edition right now. What I was showing you in the UI was the developer edition itself. So this is the same edition you'd be using. Go create your workflows, test them out, and see what you can do. See what kind of complex workflows you can create. I know I've created some very complex ones like this one. Here, I'm able to attempting to create an AI agent on my own by using a workflow. And this was created largely with Claude, I believe. So anyway, go check it out on your own. It's free use. And I'm sure Michael will get everyone the links if they need them.